Try to miss it. Okay. Welcome back to Pregame.tv. Ken Thomson, good friend Bryan Leonard, and of course NCAA football right around the corner. The opening Thursday, August 28th. Looking forward to that. Couple big games, A&M at South Carolina, amongst others. And then I'll be at Southern Cal for the opener as Fresno State takes on the Trojans. Rematch of the Las Vegas Bowl. I hope it goes the same way because SC pounded Derek Carr and the Bulldogs.
You going as a fan or you working that one?
Going as a fan, baby. Always go to SC games as a fan because I like to have a little extracurricular activity.
There you go, which is one of the reasons why I support the Arizona State.
You know what?
Here.
It is funny. When I worked in L.A. and I was calling games for Long Beach State, Arizona State football was on our station. We were like 48,000 alumni in Southern California from ASU. So I had the season tickets, would go down there. And last time, I've gone to several games, but I remember going to the game against Washington State when they retired Pat Tillman's number, which was an emotional day because as a player, he was one of my favorites.
Yes,
I really enjoyed him. And, of course, for him to leave an NFL career behind and go join the service, I just gave kudos to that.
Yeah, hats off to that. At the time, everybody thought he was crazy. But, hey, he did what he thought needed to be done. And it's just the outcome is just unfortunate.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right. As we get into week one, different than any other week because we don't have any film on it. We don't have any exhibition games. So we go right into the regular season. And college football, you have the 14 playoff coming up, first time as far as Division I, Bryan. But still, it's tough on these teams. I mean, you can ill afford to lose twice. If you lose twice and your schedule strength is solid like Stanford's last year, you have an outside chance to get in that top four. But if you don't have that type of strength of schedule, you've got to really be leery. And again, with 4 teams, you never know. If 4 teams run the table, you have no idea whether or not you're going to make the postseason. Some of these teams have scheduled very difficult games as far as non-conference. And then we look at some of the other teams, you just say, are you kidding me? How does that happen? But I think the committee will take all of that into consideration.
Yeah, it'll be nice to finally have a national championship that everybody can agree with this year. The first week of college football is always a little bit different. You're looking at things a little bit differently than you would because, as you mentioned, they don't play any exhibition games. One of the things I take a look at, and I've got a whole list here of what I look at when I'm handicapping, the bigger programs have more money, which means they can spend more money on the coaching staffs. Now, granted, a lot of these schools, they start to practicing at the same time, but the bigger name schools have the better coaches. They've been around longer, so they have an advantage. So you may look at a game and say, boy, that line looks awful high when they're playing a non-conference team early on. But keep in mind, they've got better coaches. These players are better coached up, and they've got more talent. So I'm not afraid to lay a bigger number the first week, or I may not do that later on in the season. You know, and a lot of teams are putting in new systems, offense, defense. Obviously, you got new coaches. So some teams that have had a high-profile offense, a team that scores a lot of points in the past, if you're switching up your offense, it's going to take some time to get that together, especially on defense too. So what you saw in the past is not necessarily what you're going to see in the future for this first week. So we could take advantage of that. So make sure you know which teams, obviously coaching changes, but which teams may be switching their offenses or their defenses.
All right, now I'm a big USC fan. I know Sarkisian, 22-3 as an offensive coordinator with Pete Carroll, but a guy that likes to go no huddle, pick it up. Kessler, when Orgeron took the reins off him last year when he came in for Kiffin, and Kessler started airing the ball down the field, that opened things up for a solid running game, and USC started scoring more. Do you look at that, and do you play totals early on?
I do play totals if I think there's an advantage there. And obviously, totals should be easier to beat, and they are easier to beat, but the lines move so fast, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit later, is if you like something, you better get into it now. I mean, we've got 3 weeks before the first games go off. These lines are already out there. So if you're waiting around for the information, if you like something, chances are somebody else likes it too, especially if you do your homework. So don't wait around. Don't bet these things Friday night, Saturday morning. Bet them now. Get the better lines. And, I take a look at teams that are replacing their starting quarterbacks. I don't like to play a team, talked about Texas A&M. I don't like to play a team out of the gate that's got a brand new quarterback in their starting, especially if it's a team that does not manufacture Class A talent, like a lot of these schools do. I mean, what is it, a couple of years ago where Central Michigan had the #1 draft choice, all of a sudden after that, there's a big drop-off. So take a look at small schools who lose a first-round draft pick. That's a lot bigger of a loss than it is for your Ohio States or USC's, those type of schools, which are able to come back and just reload each and every year. Mm-hmm. A lot of people talk about returning starters, and our departed friend Mike Lee, he was the first one that really brought this up, returning starters. Well, unfortunately, now I think it's overblown. Everybody looks at returning starters, and you could buy 3 or 4 different magazines. They're all going to have different amount of returning starters. Is it the guy who started the first game? Is it the guy who started the last game? Is it the guy who started more games? So take a look at that, and you've got to realize what the returning starter situation is. And just because you got a returning starter does not mean this team is just going to pick up where they did the prior year.
Or if they were 0-11 or 2-9, who cares if they're returning starters? We may not want those guys.
There was a team, I don't remember if it was UAB, there was a team last year, it may have been Troy.
Southern Miss.
Was it Southern Miss? That brought back a ton of starters. Well, you bring back a ton of bad football players, that's not a positive. Another thing I take a look at is good programs who are off of a bad year.
Okay.
I want to play on them early in the season. In fact, you could name a few of those programs off the top of your head, Michigan being one of them, but also teams who ended the season prematurely, like an Alabama, a team that was expected to play in the national championship, and all of a sudden the rug's pulled out beneath them, and they're done. They've got something to prove, and they have the talent to do it. What I always do is I make my own power ratings. In my opinion, for football, you need to have power ratings. Basketball, a little bit different. You still need to have them, but they're so flexible. You're not getting as many advantages, at least I'm not. But football, make some good power ratings. If you don't know how to make them, borrow somebody else's. There's a lot of good power ratings out there. So when the line is out, when that line comes out, you need to know if that's a good line or a bad line. Some of these lines have moved a ton since the games of the years have already come out. And granted, they've only come out at a few spots, so you don't have as much money bet into them. But if a game comes out at +24, now it's down to 17, it doesn't mean that 17 is a good number. It doesn't mean that 17 is a bad number. You have to compare it to the power rating that you have.
Let me ask you something. Because of the power ratings, that's something that I really have not done myself in the past. I'm a guy that watches a ton of games. I feel I'm pretty astute as far as evaluating talent, chemistry, something I've done very well at. But I enjoy watching and listening to others like yourself that have been veterans and have used those power ratings. And I understand maybe more at the NFL level, but at the collegiate level, when you have 120 teams and you've got maybe 50 that are in that middle of the road type where a lot of them are replacing 7-8 starters on each side of the football, how do you know where to put the Middle Tennessees or the Akrons?
Basically, what I do is I take my list, 128 teams this year, by the way.
Okay.
I take my list every year, keep adding more. I take my list from my top power rating for the previous year all the way down to the last power rating. And then I take the players coming back, the players that they're bringing in, the recruiting that they're bringing in, the players that they've lost. And so I've got, let's say my number 1 is a 98, and my number 128 this year, let's say, is a 44. Mm-hmm. And then I go in and I group, and I say, okay, well, number 1's Florida State again. Last year they were a 98. This year's team's going to be, I think, at least as good, maybe even better. I'll start off Florida State at a 99.
Well, with that schedule, and again, the ACC being way down, I think Florida State has a cruise control to the Final Four.
I think I've got them as a 17-point favorite in every game and higher. So if they lose, there should be a game that they shouldn't lose. But then I look at like my second best team last year, I think it was Alabama or Auburn, something to that range. Let's say I made them like a 94. And I'll take a look, I say, well, what did they do this year? And I happen to think Auburn's going to take a step back this year a little bit. I think they overperformed. So let's say last year I made them a 94. This year I would make them a 90, something to that effect. And so I just make it all the way down. You get down to the last, the UMasses and the Central Michigans and those type of teams. They'll come in around 48s to 44. And that's how I make my power rating. So when the lines come out, I have an idea of what the line should be. And to be honest with you, when I've gone around town, just about every game of the year has went my way. In fact, I can't think of any one of them that hasn't.
What about quarterback position? Because that's a key position. But with other teams in the SEC, like in Alabama, an LSU, a Georgia, all three of those teams are replacing their quarterbacks, but all three have solid running games and good defenses, so they may be able to get away with a couple vanilla offensive performances while they get that quarterback entrenched in the offense.
Yeah, which brings me back to the point I was making earlier about the smaller teams from smaller conferences losing a big player like that. In Alabama, I mean, McCarron was an excellent ball player for him, playing for the Browns now, but he wasn't a high draft pick. I mean, he's a guy that may prove to be a quality player in the NFL, but they just churn him out. These teams just churn him out. Look at all the great quarterbacks that come out of USC. I mean, they can recruit those type of players. So even though you've got a guy who's maybe a 4-year starter that's gone, it's not going to have as much of an effect when you've got, a 5-star recruit or 4-star recruit coming in and take his place.
Let me ask you something about the move by Nick Saban, bringing over Lane Kiffin to help on the offense. I don't get it. I think he really stymied the SC offense. We saw, like I said, Orgeron take the reins off Kessler. Once Kessler was able to air it off down the field, that took a lot of pressure off the running game. What about Kiffin? Will he fit in there with Saban?
I don't know. I mean, the guy's been a great coordinator everywhere he's been, maybe not so well in the last year or so, but I think a lot of that has been his assistant coaches, even when he was a coach, his assistant coaches have all been top-of-the-line kind of guys. So he's been having a lot of guys do his work for him. Maybe this is where he deserves to be. Maybe he's not the head coach. Maybe he is a better coordinator. And, I gotta admit, I like it that Saban did this. So he's putting him out there. He says, okay, now you're coming in. You've got quality players. Let's see what you can do. The offense has been somewhat stagnant for Alabama. They've had to live off of that great defense for the last few years. It's worth a shot.
All right, last thing, because college, a lot of times you have late suspensions, things like this. I mean, look what's going on down in Austin. Charlie Strong putting his foot down. A lot of guys booted off the team. So people that may have played Texas early on, as far as some of these early ones, and granted the limits are not that big, but still, if you got behind Texas early on, looking right now, you're praying that David Ash stays healthy, because if he goes down, like my good man Jeff Ketchum, who does orangebloods.com, said, you're looking at a house of cards down there in Austin. What about it?
Yeah, this is a Texas team. When you got the new coach coming in, what I like that he goes in and cleans out. Problem is, it's not going to help you early on in the season.
Right.
And you take a look. These magazines. I'm friends with Phil Steele, and he's coming to pregame, and he writes this thing all year long. And in the summer, he sends it to the printer. It's been a long time since he wrote that magazine. So basically, a lot of the guys that he was expecting to play are not playing. You got injuries, you got suspensions, disqualifications, transfers, guys who didn't make grades. So you've got to go in and you've got to say, okay, basically what I do is I've got a listing of every player I think is going to play for each of these teams, and I just put a line through their name every time they're out for the season. And you'll just go through and you'll look at, you pointed about the Texas. I mean, there's a few teams out there that have lost a lot of players so far, and a lot of them are really good players, first or second string guys. So you've got to make your adjustment. You make your original power rating, and all of a sudden, let's say you lose, you're starting, middle linebacker or whatever. You knock a point off of that, or you knock 2 points off of it, depending on his backups or whatever. So you've got to make those adjustments. And and I'll give Phil a plug on his philsteele.com site. He does keep up with a lot of the major injuries. So if you're just getting into this, go to that website now and just start doing, like I said, just go off every one. I mean, it was a UAB last year. I go back to UAB again. But there was one team that just come out and everybody was getting suspended. Everybody was getting hurt all year long. So they were supposed to have had a pretty good team. And then by the time the season came around, they were just a shell of themselves. And for the first 3 or 4 weeks till everybody caught up, we were able to go against them.
Right.
And that's what this is for.
There you go. All right. Any other tips that you want to get out there?
No, other than if there, as I mentioned before, if there's something you like now, bet it now, because you're going to lose the line. Something I like to do all year long is take a look at what the lines are on a Tuesday morning. This is all after everybody's bet into the openers. By Tuesday, everything is up. All the sports books in the country basically put them up on a Monday. Write down all the lines on Tuesday.
Okay.
Then come game day on a Saturday, like let's say 2 hours before game time. Let's see how many of those lines have moved. If they moved significantly, let's say a line has moved 3 points. If you can't find out why that line has moved 3 points, chances are, and we're in the sports industry, chances are there's a big sports service out there that gave out that play that has nothing to do with any information. It's just he's got a lot of clients. So if the line all of a sudden was 2 on Tuesday is now at 5 or 6, I wouldn't feel bad at all by going against that line move, especially if you make your own power ratings and come up with that line being 3.
There you go. And a lot of times you could be going against some syndicated plays. Talk about that real quick.
Yeah, I've got no problem going against them. You got to realize the guys who bet for a living on sports, they're betting numbers. They're not betting teams. The NFL, with 3 being so key, a line could be 2.5. Love the favorite. Love the favorite. Line could be 3.5. Love the dog. It all depends on the key numbers
right.
and those hit numbers. So just because a line is moving does not mean that they know what's going on. It means they're taking all those numbers out over those key numbers.
And last thing, I know a lot of people still like to bet teasers in college football. I know it's a no-no.
Yeah, you don't want to bet teasers. In the NFL, you want to only bet teasers if they're covering key numbers,
Okay.
3, 4, 6, 7. In college football, in my opinion, you never want to bet teasers. I hate to tell people what to do with their money, but the numbers are so far off in college football that you're really doing a disservice to your bankroll by betting teasers.
And at the end of those games, when you look at those results, 75% of the time, those teasers, the points that you take, won't even come into play. So sometimes you've shafted yourself. Instead of getting a 2-team parlay that you could have had if you wanted to do it that way, you probably could have gotten a shot at that better than going for the teaser.
Yeah, and if you do want to play teasers in college football, pay more attention to the lower total games. I see guys, last year when there was it West Virginia and Baylor scored like 200 points in the game. If you know they're going to score over 100 points in a football game, don't tease that game.
Right.
You don't want to be teasing Conference USA or whatever the American League or whatever they're calling it now. Tease the leagues like the SEC, where you know what you're going to get every year, every game, and you got totals, in the mid-40s or whatever. You don't want to tease the high-scoring games. You just ruin it all.
Bryan Leonard, he's a veteran. Pregame.tv, appreciate him stopping by and, of course, giving you folks out there some tips that may help you during the season. But, again, that's why we've got a great staff. RJ's put together an outstanding staff. Check out all the pros. Hey, you know what? There's a lot of guys that can make you some good money there. I know I came with the group last year, and I learned a lot from a lot of veterans out here, and Bryan Leonard being one of them, a guy that's been doing it for a long time, and he is known as Mr. MAC, Mr. Mid-American Conference here, pregame.com. I'm Ken Thomson. He's Bryan Leonard. Don't forget, check me out, SportsX Radio on the Yahoo Sports Radio Network, Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 Pacific time. And, of course, you can tweet and follow me at Ken Thompson87. Bryan, do you do the Twitter?
I do the Twitter at BL Sports.
At BL Sports. There you go. So follow us social media-wise. Cade Cridlin, he's our main guy, the production guy that has to sit and listen to us babble for so long, but we appreciate his service as well. Folks, have an awesome season. Looking forward to bringing you videos all football season long. Ken Thomson, Bryan Leonard, pregame.tv. Have an awesome week.